A foremost historian, author, and academic, Professor Chima Jacob Korieh says Igbo-speaking communities represent a significant part of the diaspora. Professor Korieh stated this during June 2025 edition of Nkatomu, a monthly distinguished speaker series organized by the Center for Memories. In his presentation, which he titled Igbo Gade, Reclaiming the Igbo Blueprint in the Cultural and Political Evolution of Sub-Saharan Africa, Professor Korieh argued that Igbo migration was the largest migration in human history.
That began some 5,000 years ago, and perhaps, if you look at the map also, an ascension of that migration to what I call the African diaspora in the New World. So, what is important, of course, is to understand how the Igbo people were critical to these two levels of migration. Internal within Africa, external within the African diaspora. And I mean by the word here, diaspora, if you look at what is today the United States, Trinidad and Tobago, Haiti, Cuba, Jamaica, there's a large proportion of black people in those parts of the world. What is important for us is to think about how those people ended up in what is today referred to as the New World or the Americas. Perhaps 70% of those who ended up in the African diaspora from what is known as the Bight of Biafra were Igbo speaking. Right? So, they constitute a very important part of what is today known as the African diaspora. Perhaps in a state like Virginia in the United States, 60% of black Virginians have Igbo ancestry. The same with Cuba, right? So, I'm looking at those two forms of migration and to think and understand why the Igbo is important in assessing those migrations and their outcome. So let me place some emphasis on the Bantu migration, which occurred within Africa. And when I talk about the Bantu migration, I want you to look at it from a linguistic point of view. How and why is the Igbo language related to Kikuyu, spoken in East Africa? How is the Igbo language related to Xhosa, spoken in Southern Africa, right? How is it related to so many other languages in what is Sub-Saharan Africa? Linguistically, the Igbo speak a language that belongs to the larger family of languages known as Bantu or Niger-Congo. There's close to 100 million people across Sub-Saharan Africa speak these languages or related languages, collectively known as Bantu languages. How did this happen? What does the Igbo have in common with Kikuyu, as I mentioned earlier, Xhosa, etc.? They share a common linguistic affinity. Scholars have explained this through the phenomenon known as Bantu migration or Bantu expansion. By 1000 BC, in a series of migrations, Bantu speakers had spread south of the savannah, across Angola, and to the great lake regions of East Africa. Over the next 1,500 years, they scattered throughout the Central and Southern Africa, interacting with indigenous people and absorbing those indigenous people as they moved along. Their migration throughout Africa is one of the largest migrations in human history. A migration that began 1000 BC and continued to the 4th century AD.
The professor of history further examined how agricultural practices in its various forms were peculiar to the Igbos and how it was their chief source of employment.
It can be speculated that the ancestors of the Igbo were part of these Proto-Bantu speakers whose knowledge of agriculture, especially tuber production, yam production, and iron working technology helped to people and colonize the rest of the subcontinent. If I had mentioned, the Leja, right? Iron works, which I think is phenomenal. If you go to Leja in Nsukka, that people were already working iron smelting here, centuries back. Those skills were very central, and the knowledge of yam production in the way the Igbo people began to expand and leave this area as they seek new opportunities for agriculture and absorbing indigenous people they encounter. Some of you may come across, if you look at Central Africa, the people they call the Pygmies, right? Have you heard the word Pygmies of the Congo, right? Those are indigenous people that these Bantu speakers, with their superior agricultural knowledge and iron technology, were able to absorb those people. But their language never remained sort of like Igbo. They incorporated other words from those existing languages. But what is important in terms of understanding the Proto-Bantu languages is that there are elements of those Proto-Bantu languages that have been returned, right, in sub-Saharan Africa. For example, we use the word Omo, right, to refer to children of Omo Cheze, Omo this. Most Bantu speakers have the same prefix, Ba for people, right, Bakongo, and so on and so forth. So, a number of theories have been put forward to explain this migration. There is speculations that overpopulation encouraged some groups to move to new places in search of fertile land and in order to practice agriculture. It is important to emphasize that both the development of agriculture and the existence of unusually high population density have been a defining character of Igbo land even to today. The long history of plant domestication is evident in the large variety of food crops and edible plants in Igbo society. The variety of crops and plants attest to the antiquity of agriculture in Igbo region, including plants like, Africa rice, Guinea corn, Hungary rice, Bambara groundnut, etc., okra, and many, many others that were domesticated in this area and gave these migrants the skills and tools they use in expanding and conquering the rest of the continent. Now, accounts of captives of Igbo origin in the New World provide an unusual and rare glimpse into the agricultural and exchange economy of the Igbo. If you look at the walls over there, there's a picture of an Igbo ex-slave known as Olaudia Equiano. Anybody heard about Olaudia Equiano? Right? No? Okay. So Olaudia Equiano was born in an Igbo village in 1745 and was sold into slavery when he was 11 years. Equiano recorded later when he wrote his autobiography in 1799, he recorded life and livelihood in his village. There are speculations that it comes from Iseke, which is today in Ihia. And he talked about agriculture, 18th century, that agriculture is our chief employment, and everyone, even the children and women, are engaged in it. Thus, we have a habit of labor from our earliest years. Equiano's description of Igbo society and the economy in the 18th century is supported by accounts given by other Igbo slaves in the Americas. Another Igbo slave in Jamaica, known as Archibald Montet, was born in 1799 in Igbo land and was enslaved in Jamaica. He affirmed in his memoir that yams, potatoes, and Indian corn were an integral part of Igbo agriculture in the 17th and 18th century. 19th century accounts offer more perspective. In his journey to Bonny in 1840, Hermann Kohl, a German doctor, noticed that the Igbo exported agricultural produce and metal goods to Bonny. He described the Igbo as rich in natural products, including maize, rice, yam, oil or palm oil, dyewood, and cotton, and was quite indispensable in providing staple food to Bonny. Bonny is in the riverine area, right? W.E. Crew, who visited Nsukka in 1866, was impressed by the abundance of agricultural produce, and he described that in the market they abound in corn, palm oil, palm wine, fish, deer, meat, dog, and other products like fowl, tobacco, eggs, and yams. What I'm trying to emphasize is the importance of understanding the antiquity of agriculture in Igbo land. And it is this skill of agriculture and iron technology that enabled the Proto-Bantu speakers, which includes the Igbo, to expand and people what is today sub-Saharan Africa.
The detailed dialogue that followed the lecture brought to light several critical issues such as why Igbo accent should be retained, why Biafran history war should be part of the curriculum.
Right? So I discovered, Prof, you were speaking that your accent was very much that of an Igbo. And then when I saw the flyer and saw Marcy, you know, the Arabs are usually very intentional. When an Arab, despite being a professor, could go like Al-Haji, he wants you to know where he's coming from. You know, so why has your accent to everything? And why do you also want to, like, you know, let everybody know that you're accent? You know, just for the lighter mood, because we are driving somewhere.
Well, maybe my brain it's not where my accent actually. Yeah, sometimes, I mean, I have this conversation sometimes with my kid, and then he said, Dad, you know, that's not how to say it. I said, okay, you can't teach me how to speak English now. I only learned how to speak the same, you know, Nigerian English.
Deal, you know, with a student in a past that is very significant like this, and like you could see, several years after the agitation has continued in the southeast. So how would you assess such kind of, you know, omission by those preparing the curriculum for our students?
You know, for those who write the history. So, if somebody is writing the history of the Biafra War from a federal perspective, they're going to write a different history. It doesn't mean that objectivity in history doesn't count. That's very important. But the politics of history is sometimes historians have to think about what they are writing contributes to, or how it contributes to shaping, right, social consciousness in society. So, if you're writing a history that excludes aspects of the Nigerian history and narrative.
Speaking, the executive director of the center, Mazi Ihani Ibuko, said Nkatomuibe was a monthly distinguished speakers series organized by the center, which rooted in the Igbo tradition of communal discourse. He added that the program had become a vital platform for addressing pressing issues affecting Ndi Igbo, promoting Igbo values, heritage, and collective prosperity. The center also presented a plaque to Professor Korieh in appreciation to his honoring occasion.
A presentation, a plaque, to commemorate today for you to do a great lecture. Congratulations, Lord.
For Aneke TV, it's been Chinwendo Ifeonwankwo reporting.